So I wanted us to take and look at some other writings from the time period that would have influenced Ellison. And one that I found that I thought was really interesting is this short story "Sweat" by Zora Neale Hurston. So we're gonna look at this we're gonna look at this together and talk about it here after I get finished. And excuse me, I'm feeling a little creaky with my allergies, so you have to bear with me. It was 11 o'clock of a spring night in Florida. It was Sunday. Any other night, Delia Jones would have been in bed for 2 hours by this time. But she was a washwoman, and Monday morning meant a great deal to her. So she collected the soiled clothes on Saturday when she returned the clean things. Sunday night after church, she sorted them and put the white things to soak. It saved her almost a half-day's start. A great hamper in the bedroom held the clothes that she brought home. It was so much neater than a number of bundles lying around. She squatted in the kitchen floor beside the great pile of clothes, sorting them into small heaps according to color, and humming a song in a mournful key, but wondering through it all where Sykes, her husband, had gone with her horse and buckboard. Just then something long, round, limp, and black fell upon her shoulders and slithered to the floor beside her. A great terror took hold of her. It softened her knees and dried her mouth so that it was a full minute before she could cry out or move. And then she saw it was the big bullwhip her husband liked to carry when he drove. She lifted her eyes to the door and saw him standing there, bent over with laughter at her fright. She screamed at him. "Sykes, what you throw that whip on me like that? You know it would scare me. Looks just like a snake, and you know how scared I is of snakes." "Course I knowed it. That's how come I done it." He slapped his leg with his hand and almost rolled on the ground in mirth. "If you such a big fool that you got to have a fit over an earthworm or a string, I don't care how bad I scared you. You ain't got no business doing it. God knows it's a sin. Someday I'm gonna drop dead from some of your foolishness. 'Nother thing, where you been with my rig? I feed that pony. He ain't for you to be driving with no bullwhip." "You sure is one aggravating woman," he declared, and stepped into the room. She resumed her work and did not answer him at once. "I done told you time and again to keep them white folks' clothes out of this house." He picked up the whip and glared down at her. Delia went on with her work. She went out to the yard and returned with a galvanized tub and set it on the wash bench. She saw that Sykes had kicked all the clothes together again, and now stood in her way truculently, his whole manner hoping, praying for an argument. But she walked calmly around him and commenced to resort the things. "Next time I'm going to kick 'em outdoors," he threatened as he struck a match along the leg of his corduroy breeches. Delia never looked up from her work, and her thin, stooped shoulders sagged further. "I ain't for no fuss tonight, Sykes. I just come from taking sacrament at the church house." He snorted scornfully. "Yeah, you just come from the church house on a Sunday night, but here you is going to work on them clothes. You ain't nothing but a hypocrite. One of them amen corner Christians. Sing, whoop, and shout, then come home and wash white folks' clothes on a Sabbath." He stepped roughly upon the whitest pile of things, kicking them helter-skelter as he crossed the room. His wife gave a little scream of dismay and then quickly gathered them together again. "Sykes, you quit grinding dirt into this clothes. How can I get through my Saturday if I don't start on Sunday?" "I don't care if you never get through. Anyhow, I done promised God and a couple other men. I ain't going to have it in my house. Don't give me no lip, neither, else I'll throw 'em out and put my fist up beside your head to boot." Delia's habitual meekness seemed to slip from her shoulders like a blown scarf. She was on her feet, her poor little body, her bare-knuckly hands bravely defying the strapping Holt before her. "Look here, Sykes, you done gone too far. I've been married to you for 15 years, and I've been taking in washing for 15 years. Sweat, sweat, sweat. Working sweat, crying sweat, praying sweat." "What's that got to do with me?" he asked brutally. "What's it got to do with you, Sykes? My tub of suds has filled your belly with victuals more times than your hands has filled it. My sweat's done paid for this house, and I reckon I can keep on sweating in it." She seized the iron skillet from the stove and struck a defensive pose, which act surprised him greatly, coming from her. It cowed him, and he didn't strike her as he usually did. No, you won't, she panted. That old snaggle-toothed black woman you running with ain't coming here to pile up on my sweat and blood. You ain't paid for nothing on this place, and I'm going to stay right here till I'm toted out foot foremost. Well, you better quit getting me riled up, else they'll be toting you out sooner than you expect. I'm so tired of you. I don't know what to do. God, how I hate skinny women. A little awed by this new Delia, he sidled out the door and slammed the back gate after him. He didn't say where he'd gone, but she knew too well. She knew very well he would not return till nearly daybreak also. Her work over, she went on to bed, but not to sleep at once. Things had come to a pretty pass. She lay awake, gazing upon the debris that cluttered their matrimonial trail. Not an image left standing along the way. Anything like flowers had long ago been drowned in the salty stream that had pressed from her heart. Her tears, her sweat, her blood. She had brought love to the union, and he brought a longing after the flesh. 2 months after the wedding, he had given her the first brutal beating. She had the memory of his numerous trips to Orlando with all his wages when he had returned to her penniless, even before the first year had passed. She was young and soft then, but now she thought of her knotty, muscled limbs, her harsh, knuckly hands, and drew herself up into an unhappy little ball in the middle of the big feather bed. Too late now to hope for love. Even if it were not Bertha, it would be someone else. This case differed from the others, only in that she was bolder than the others. Too late for everything except her little home. She built it for her old days and planted one by one the trees and flowers there. It was lovely to her. Lovely. Somehow before sleep came, she found herself saying aloud, "Oh well, whatever goes over the devil's back has got to come under his belly. Sometimes or other Sykes, like anybody else, is going to reap his sowing." After that, she was able to build a spiritual earthworks against her husband. His shells could no longer reach her. Amen. She went to sleep and slept until he announced his presence in bed by kicking her feet and rudely snatching the covers away. "Give me some covers here. And get your damn foot over in your side. I ought to smash you in the mouth for drawing that skillet on me." Delia went clear to the railing without answering him, a triumphant indifference to all that he was or did. So, their marriage here is obviously not one that we would consider nowadays to be any sort of happy marriage, but this was written in the 1920s, and at that time, as bad as black men were treated, black women were treated worse, and could only expect worse. She did the wash and brought in all the money to this house, and her husband felt as though he could torture her with her greatest fear, and that he could hit her, and that he could leave and go out and cheat on her, and he'd been doing that for 15 years. So the only thing that she had was her faith, and she'd been going to church, and she was praying, and she said here, where is it? Sorry. And she says here, whatever goes over the devil's back has got to come under his belly. Sometime or other, Sykes is going to reap what he sows. And we've all heard that before. But she basically is saying karma, right? That he's going to get it. He's going to get his in the end. And he comes in and he's mean to her again. And so Delia went clear to the rail without answering him. She just moved all the way over to the railing of the bed and was indifferent to what he did. The week was as full of work for Delia as all other weeks, and Saturday found her behind her little pony, collecting and delivering clothes. It was a hot, hot day near the end of July. The village men on Joe Clark's porch even chewed cane listlessly. They didn't hurl the cane knots as usual. They let them dribble over the edge of the porch. Even conversation had collapsed under the heat. "Here comes Delia Jones," Jim Merchant said, as the shaggy pony came round the bend of the road toward him. The rusty buckboard was heaped with baskets of crisp, clean laundry. "Yep," Joe Lindsay agreed. "Hot or cold, rain or shine, just as regular as the weeks rolling round. Delia carries 'em and fetches 'em on Saturday." "She better if she wants to eat," said Moss. "Syke Jones ain't what worth the shot and powder hit would take to kill him. Not to her he ain't." "He sure ain't," Walter Thomas chimed in. "It's too bad, too, 'cause she was a right pretty little trick when he got her. I'd have married her myself if he hadn't beat me to it." Delia nodded briefly at the men as she drove past. Too much knocking will ruin any woman. He done beat her enough to kill 3 women, let alone change their looks," said Elijah Mosley. "How Sykes can stomach that big, black, greasy mogul he's laying around with gets me. I swear that 8 Rock couldn't kiss a sardine can. I done thrown out the back doorway last night. It takes me a minute. She wrote it with the way that they speak, and so I mean you get the feeling for their language and the way that they speak, but it is it's a challenge to read sometimes. So he's saying that the woman that he's running around with is ugly. Okay. She's fat, that's how come. He's always been crazy about fat women, put in Merchant. He'd have been tied up with one a long time ago if he'd have found one to have him. Did I tell you about him coming sliding around my wife, bringing her a basket of pecans out of his yard for a present? Yes, sir, my wife. She told him to take 'em right straight back home, 'cause Delia worked so hard over that wash tub, she reckoned everything on the place tastes like sweat and soap suds. I just wished I'd have caught him there. I'd have made his hips catch on fire down that shell road. I know he done it too. I sees him grinning at every woman that passes, Walter Thomas said. But even so, he used to eat some mighty big hunks of humble pie to get that little woman he's got. She was as pretty as a speckled pup. That was 15 years ago. He used to be so scared of losing her, she could make him do some parts of a husband's duty. They never was the same in mind. They ought to be a law about him, said Lindsay. He ain't fit to carry guts to a bear. Clark spoke for the first time. 'Tain't no law on earth that can make a man be decent if he ain't in him. There's plenty of men that take a wife like they do a joint and a sugar cane. It's round, juicy, and sweet when they get it. But they squeeze and grind, and wring till they wring every drop of pleasure that's in 'em out. When they're satisfied that they's wrung dry, they treats 'em just like they do a cane chew. They throw 'em away. They know what they're doing while they're doing it, and they hate themselves for it, but they keep on hanging after her till she's empty. Then they hates her for being a cane chew and in the way. We had to take Syke and that stray woman of his down in Lake Howell Swamp and lay on the rawhide till they can't say Lord of mercy. He always was an overbearing man, but since that white woman from up north done teach him how to run an automobile, he done get too biggity to live, and we ought to kill him, old man Anderson advised. A grunt of approval went around the porch, but the heat was melting their civic virtue, and Elijah Mosley began to bait Joe Clark. Come on, Joe, get a watermelon out of there and slice it up for your customers. We're all suffering with this heat. The bears done got me. That's right, Joe. Watermelon is just what I need to cure the episodics. I think that's what he's saying. Sorry. Walter Thomas joined with Mosley. Come on there, Joe. We all steady customers, and you ain't set us up in a long time. You choose that. I choose that long, bow-legged Florida favorite. God and be dough. You all give me 20 cents and slice away, Clark retorted. I need a cold slice myself. Here, everybody chip in, and I'll lend you my meat knife. The money was quickly subscribed, and the huge melon brought forth. At that moment, Sykes and Bertha arrived. A determined silence fell on the porch, and the melon was put away again. Merchant snapped down the blade of his jackknife and moved toward the store door. Come on in, Joe, and give me a slab of sow belly and a pound of coffee. I almost forgot it was Saturday. Got to get on home. Most of the men left also. Just then Delia drove past on her way home as Sykes was ordering magnificently for Bertha. It pleased him for Delia to see. Get whatsoever your heart desires, honey. Wait a minute, Joe. Give her 2 bottles of strawberry soda water, a quart of parched ground peas, and a block of chewing gum. With all this, they left the store, with Sykes reminding Bertha that this was his town and she could have it as she wanted it. The men returned soon after they left, and they held their watermelon feast. Where'd Syke Jones get that woman from, anyhow? Lindsay asked. Over at Apopka. Guess they must have been cleaning out the town when she left. She don't look like a thing but a hunk of liver with hair on it. Well, she sure can squall, Dave Clark contributed. When she gets ready to laugh, she just opens her mouth and latches it back to the last notch. No old Grandpa Alligator down in Lake Bell ain't got nothing on her. Bertha had been in town 3 months now. Sykes was still paying her room rent at Della Lewis's, the only house in town that would have taken her in. Sykes took her frequently to Winter Park to stomps. He still assured her that he was the swellest man in the state. "Sho, you can have that little old house soon as I get that woman out of there. Everything belongs to me, and you sure can have it. I sure abominates that skinny woman. Lord, you sure has got one portly shape on you. You can get anything you want. This is my town, and you sure can have it." Delia's work-worn knees crawled over the earth in Gethsemane and up the rocks of Calvary many, many times during these months. She avoided the villagers and meeting places in efforts to be blind and deaf. But Bertha nullified this to a degree by coming to Delia's house to call Sykes out to her at the gates. Delia and Sykes fought all the time now with no peaceful interludes. They slept and ate in silence. 2 or 3 times Delia had attempted a timid friendliness, but she was repulsed each time. It was plain that the breeches must remain agape. The sun had burned July to August. The heat streamed down like a million hot arrows, smiting all things living upon the earth. Grass withered, leaves brown, snakes went blind and shedding, and all men and dogs went mad. Dog days. Delia came home one day and found Sykes there before her. She wondered, but started to go on into the house without speaking, even though he was standing in the kitchen door and she must either stoop under his arm or ask him to move. He made no room for her. She noticed a soap box beside the steps, but paid no attention to it, knowing that he must have brought it there. As she was stooping to pass under his outstretched arm, he suddenly pushed her backward, laughingly. Look in the box here, Delilah. I brung you something." She nearly fell upon the box in her stumbling, and when she saw what it held, she all but fainted outright. Sykes, my God, you take that rattlesnake away from here. You gotta. Oh, Jesus, have mercy." "I ain't gotta do nothing of the kind. Fact is, I ain't gotta do nothing but die. Take no use in you putting on airs, making out like you scared of that snake. He's gonna stay right here till he die. He wouldn't bite me 'cause I know how to handle him. Know how he wouldn't take breaking out his fangs against your skinny legs. Now, Syke, don't keep that thing around here to scare me to death. You knows I'm even afeard of earthworms. That's the biggest snake I ever did see. Kill him, Sykes, please. Don't ask me to do nothing for you. Go around trying to be so damn ostroperious. Nah, I ain't gonna kill it. I think a damn sight more of him than you. That's a nice snake, and anybody don't like him can just hit the grit." The village soon heard that Sykes had a snake and came over to see and ask questions. "How the hen fire did you catch that 6-foot rattler, Sykes?" Thomas asked. "He's full of frogs, so he can't hardly move, that's how. I eased up on him. But I'm a snake charmer, and I know how to handle him. Shucks, that ain't nothing. I could catch one every day if I so wanted to. What he needs is a heavy hickory club leaned real heavy on his head. That's the best way to charm a rattlesnake." "Nah, Walt, you just don't understand these diamondbacks like I do," said Sykes in a superior tone of voice. The village agreed with Walter, but the snake stayed on. His box remained by the kitchen door with its screen wire covering. 2 or 3 days later it had digested its meal of frogs and literally came to life. It rattled at every movement in the kitchen or the yard. One day as Delia came down the kitchen steps, she saw his chalky white fangs, curved like skidamars, hung in the wire meshes. This time she did not run away with averted eyes as usual. She stood for a long time in the doorway in a red fury that grew bloodier for every second as she regarded that creature the creature that was her torment. That night she broached the subject as soon as Sykes sat down at the table. "Sykes, I want you to take that snake away from here. You done starved me, and I put up with it. You beat me, and I took that, but you done killed all my insides bringing that varmint here." Sykes poured out a saucerful of coffee and drank it deliberately before he answered her. "A whole lot I care about how you feel inside or out. That snake ain't going no damn where until I gets ready for him to go. So for so far as beating is concerned, you ain't took near all that you're gonna take if you stay around me. Delia pushed back her plate and got it from the table. I hate you, Sykes, she said calmly. I hate you to the same degree that I used to love you. I done took till my belly is full up to my neck. That's the reason I got my letter from the church and moved my membership to Woodbridge, so I don't have to take no sacrament with you. I don't want to see you around me at all. Lay around with that woman all you want to, but going away from me and my house. I hate you like a suck-egg dog. Sykes almost let out the huge wad of cornbread and collard greens he was chewing fall out of his mouth in amazement. He had a hard time whipping himself up to the proper fury to try and answer Delia. Well, I'm glad you does hate me. I'm sure I'm sure tired of you hanging on to me. I don't want you. Look at your stringy old neck. Your raw bony legs and arms is enough to cut a man to death. You look just like the devil's doll baby to me. You can't hate me no worse than I hate you. I've been hating you for years. Your old black hide don't look like nothing to me, but a passel of wrinkled up rubber with your big old yas flap on each side like a pair of buzzard wings. Don't think I'm gonna be run away from my house either. I'm going to the white folks about you, my young man, the very next time you lay your hands on me. My cup is done runneth over. Delia said this with no signs of fear, and Sykes departed from the house, threatening her, but made not the slightest move to carry out any of them. That night he didn't return at all, and the next day being Sunday, Delia was glad she didn't have to quarrel before she hitched up her pony and drove the 4 miles to Woodbridge. She stayed to the night service, love feast, which was very warm and full of spirit. And the emotional winds, her domestic trials, were borne far and wide, so that she sang as she drove homeward. Jordan water, black and cold, chills the body, not the soul. And I want to cross the Jordan in the calm time. She came from the barn to the kitchen door and stopped. What's the matter, old Satan? You ain't kicking up your racket? She addressed the snake's box. Complete silence. She went on into the house with a new hope in its birth struggles. Perhaps her threat to go to the white folks had frightened Sykes. Perhaps he was sorry. 15 years of misery and suppression had brought Delia to a place where she would hope anything that looks toward a way over or through her wall of inhibitions. She felt in the match safe behind the stove at once for a match. There was only one there. That guy would have fetched nothing here to save his rotten neck, but he can run through what I bring quick enough. Now he done toted off nigh onto half a box of matches. He done had that woman here in my house, too. Nobody but a woman could tell how she knew this even before she struck the match, but she did, and it put into her a new fury. Presently she brought in the tubs to put the white things to soak. This time she decided she need not bring the hamper out of the bedroom. She'd go in there and do the sorting. She picked up the pot-bellied lamp and went in. The room was small, and the hamper stood hard by the foot of the white iron bed. She could sit and reach through the bedpost, resting as she worked. I want to cross the Jordan in a calm time, she's singing again. The mood of the love feast had returned. She threw back the lid of the basket almost gaily. Then, moved by both horror and terror, she swung back toward the door. There lay the snake in the basket. He moved sluggishly at first, but even as she turned round and round, jumped up and down in an insanity of fear, he began to stir vigorously. She saw him pouring his awful beauty from the basket upon the bed. Then she seized the lamp and ran as fast as she could to the kitchen. The wind from the open door blew out the light, and the darkness added to her terror. She sped to the darkness of the yard, slamming the door after her before she thought to set down the lamp. She didn't feel safe even on the ground, so she climbed up in the hay barn. There for an hour or more she lay sprawling upon the hay, a gibbering wreck. Finally she grew quiet, and after that coherent thought. With this stalked through her a cold, bloody rage. Hours of this. A period of introspection, a space of retrospection, then a mixture of both. Out of this awful calm. Well, I done the best I could. If things ain't right, God knows it ain't my fault. She went to sleep, a twitch sleep, and woke up to a faint gray sky. There was a loud hollow sound below. She peered out. Sykes was at the woodpile, demolishing a wire-covered box. He hurried to the kitchen, but hung outside there some minutes before he entered, and stood some minutes more inside before he closed it after him. The gray in the sky was spreading. Delia descended without fear now, and crouched beneath the low bedroom window. The drawn shade shut out the dawn, shut in the night, but the thin walls held back no sound. That old scratch has woke up now, she mused at the tremendous whir inside, which every woodsman knows is one of the sound illusions. The rattlers of ventriloquist. His whir sounds to the right, to the left, straight ahead, behind, close underfoot, everywhere but where it is. Woe to him who guesses wrong unless he's prepared to hold up his end of the argument. Sometimes he strikes without rattling at all. Inside, Sykes heard nothing until he knocked a pot lid off the stove while trying to reach the match safe in the dark. He had emptied his pocket at Bertha's. The snake seemed to wake up under the stove, and Sykes made a quick leap into the bedroom. In spite of the gin he had had, his head was clearing now. "My God," he chattered, "if only I'd struck a light." The rattling ceased for a moment as he stood paralyzed. He waited. It seemed the snake waited also. "Oh, for the light! I thought he'd be too sick," Sykes was muttering to himself when the whir began again, closer, right underfoot this time. Long before this, Sykes' ability to think had been flattened down to primitive instinct, and he leapt onto the bed. Outside, Delia heard a cry that might have come from a maddened chimpanzee, stricken gorilla. All the terror, all the horror, all the rage that man could possibly express without a recognizable human sound. A tremendous stir inside there, another series of animal screams, the intermittent whir of the reptile, the shade torn violently down from the window, letting in the red dawn, a huge brown hand seizing the window stick, great dull blows upon the wooden floor, punctuating the gibberish of sound, long after the rattle of the snake had abruptly subsided. All this Delia could see and hear from her place beneath the window, and it made her ill. She crept over to the 4 o'clocks and stretched herself on the cool earth to recover. She lay there. "Delia! Delia!" She could hear Sykes calling in a most despairing tone, as one who expected no answer. The sun crept on up, and he called. Delia couldn't move. Her legs were gone flabby. She never moved. He called, and the sun kept rising. "My God," she heard him moan. "My God from heaven!" She heard him stumbling about, and got up from her flower bed. The sun was growing warm. As she approached the door, she heard him call out hopefully, "Delia, is that you I hear?" She saw him on his hands and knees as soon as she reached the door. He crept an inch or two toward her, all that he was able, and she saw his horribly swollen neck, and his one open eye shining with hope. A surge of pity too strong to support bore her all the way from that eye that could not, fail to see the tubs. He would see the lamp. Orlando with his doctors was too far. She could scarcely reach the chinaberry tree, where she waited in the growing heat, while inside she knew the cold river was creeping up and up to extinguish that eye, which must know by now that she knew. So, karma, huh? He got his comeuppance because he brought this snake in, and snake archetypically in literature is evil. It means evil, and so it's very fitting that a snake should kill him. And there at the end, he's looking to her to help him. He's calling for her. Does he really love her? Maybe. But he's calling for her here at the end. But she knew, she could scarcely reach the chinaberry tree, where she waited in the growing heat, while inside she knew the cold river was creeping up and up to extinguish that eye, which must know by now that she knew. So she let him die. Now, I don't know that I could blame her. One thing that's interesting to me, the time this is written, 1926, like I said, women didn't have a lot of rights, or women didn't have any rights, hardly any. Black women would have had even fewer. So it's interesting to me, in this section right here with these men, they're back and forth, talking about how she used to be pretty and they would have married her. And one of them saying, let's see here. that there isn't anything, that there isn't any law that could make a man decent if he isn't already. And that Sykes is the one who is basically destroying her with his oppression, with his abuse, with his horrible words. He is grinding her and squeezing her and wringing her until he has wrung every drop of pleasure in them that's out. So old man Anderson is saying we ought to take Sykes and that woman down to the lake swamp and beat them until they die. They won't be found in a swamp. And so that's what they're saying they ought to do. But as soon as Sykes shows up, they disappear. So even though they knew what he was doing to this woman was wrong, nobody would stand up for her. And I think that's one of the real tragedies of the story is that, you got these grown men who won't stand up to Sykes because they're not going to stand up for her. They're not going to bow up to him for her. And so it's kind of a short story. It has a satisfying ending, at least I think. But it's also kind of a look into the way that women were treated during that time. So Nora Hurston was a writer from that Harlem. Zora Hurston, was a writer from that Harlem Renaissance period as well. Belonging to, that Langston Hughes belonged to, and you can see how she also points out the inequalities and the terrible treatment of people by others through this short story. So that was Sweat by Zora Neale Hurston.